I love this example because I think it helps to set the scene. So this is an article, so it came up on the BBC, and it was the head of this organization. They're a tax-focused think tank in the UK, and they decided it would be a good idea to see how many people actually read their terms and conditions in their privacy policy. And it took, so they put, I mean, you can see, actually they were very clear with their language in terms of how they use the data, and then they just inserted there, by the way, we will send you a bottle of good wine. And it was good wine, I can tell you the bottle of wine later. But the point was, and it wasn't the first time they did this, apparently the last time he did it, it took 4 months, so it took even longer. So there's some progress there, it only took 3 months. But my immediate reaction was like, what was this person looking in the privacy policy? Because let's face it, if you look at the general population, we're the exception here, that will actually read privacy policies and actually draft them. But your general consumer will generally not do this. So what was this person looking at the privacy policy? Guess what? They were looking for examples to put in their privacy policy. So who never did that? Not me, but so it just goes to show, so what, I think, again, setting the scene, who are we writing the privacy policies for? Is this for us to sort of comply with a requirement, or are we really thinking about our audience, who's actually reading them? And on a more serious note, okay, so clearly we have to comply, and of course we're thinking of the GDPR, but also transparency is a principle that is global. It's not just in Europe that we have requirements to disclose to individuals how we use their data. And when you look at some of the biggest fines that we had in the GDPR, most of the sort of, I would say the majority, but a good half of those cases involve issues with lack of transparency. So it's clearly something that we cannot just take lightly. And it's a very public, obviously, statement. But it's just to set the scene. And the bottle of wine was Chateau de Sales, 1913-14, Pomerol. Very good wine.
So anyone drafting a privacy policy, you should ask your manager where your Chateau de Pomerol is.
Article 12.1 talks about how you should present information in your privacy notice. And it talks about it has to be in a concise, transparent, intelligible, and easily accessible form, using clear and plain language. And then it goes on to say, in particular, for any information addressed specifically to a child. So again, who are you talking to? Who's your audience? And how do you go about communicating quite complex concepts? So I think when you think about how you present information to a child, first of all, levels of maturity and sophistication, right? The way you communicate to a 7-year-old is not going to be the same as how you communicate to a 15-year-old. And also, I think you have to be careful not to just create a dumbed-down version of your full privacy policy. What you need to do really is look at the processing that is specifically for children and then create something that is relevant to them. But specifically about the language, anyone who puts a dinosaur in the privacy notice has got my support. But so if you look at the language here, we look at how you use our stuff, like our games, we make them even more fun. If lots of people like something, we make more games like that and make just the way you like them. Sorry, I had to do that. But so you have to be really careful. I think there are two things to think about, especially when you're communicating to children. First of all, understanding that they're a vulnerable population and you don't really want to inadvertently encourage them to provide more data than they should. So I think that's the first thing, you're all familiar now with concepts of dark patterns, even if you're gamifying, to make it interesting, should it be more about learn about the data and not so much give us the data, so we'll make it even more special for you. And I would also say communicate it to parents as well, especially in their processes where you need the parent to actually create an account. Are parents really aware how the kids' data are being used? How do you communicate that to the parents? And where do they find that information? Can parents go to, let's give an example, probably should do that because I've got teenage children, but I wouldn't know where to go to understand exactly how their data is being used in certain platforms, some of which they probably shouldn't be on. And I suppose one thing that I would also suggest is test your notice. Get a child to actually read it and see if they understand it. Know your audience. I think it would also a sort of a tip, I suppose.